Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Himiko. She's a limited 5-star ruler introduced in Yamataikoku, and she prides herself on being an engine for buster crit teams. But maybe there's more than meets the eye, so let's take a closer look. Leading off Himiko's skill set is Shrine Maiden's Charisma. It's a 3-turn party attack buff that also generates stars every turn. All this on a 5-turn cooldown, which will make for some good uptime. If you want to lean on Himiko's supportive side, you can combine this with a Fragment of 2030 for some nice star income. Next is Kido, a 3-turn personal buster and anti-demonic buff. It's also tied to a single turn invulnerability, which is annoying since you'll have to decide whether you can get away with aggression and push damage, or if you need to hold Kido for enemy NPs. Third on the list is Oracle of Light. This is Himiko's most important skill, being a 50% battery. Also happens to give her a single turn of buster crit damage and star absorption, but that battery helps you along towards the linchpin of Himiko's kit, her Noble Phantasm. To make full use of Oracle, you should run Himiko with a 50% CE in most situations. The one from Yamataikoku has mixed stats, unfortunately, so you may want to pick one with a full attack investment. Plenty of those around, which you can adapt for your particular fight. For a generic pick, consider Golden Catches the Carp for a star dump. Eternal Mirrors epitomizing the stars is a non-damaging buster NP. It provides 3 turns of a party-wide buster buff, party crit damage tied to overcharge, and 2 levels of overcharge for your team. One specific overcharge setup gets the most airplay, but let's hold off on that for the moment. Himiko has 2 general gameplay modes. First, she can operate as a selfish attacker, backed by servants like Koyanskaya, Merlin, or even Summer BB to lock her cards. Currently, that's a bit perilous since she has a 2A2B deck, meaning she can't bust her Brave Chain without her Noble Phantasm. Her crits do feel quite hard though, and in combination with a ruler class's natural resilience, you can choose to play her a bit like Summer Martha. I'd consider this the weaker of Himiko's playstyles, but with the Mighty Chain update, her lack of a 3rd buster card becomes less of a problem, so it's a tactic to keep in your back pocket. Himiko's other use is a supportive one. Remember the big 3: crit, buster, and overcharge. By narrowing your focus down to servants that can see a meaningful benefit from all 3, you can turn up some pretty interesting synergies. Some, like Gilgamesh and Saber Musashi, mostly want the buster and crit buffs, while they also see benefits to their NP effectiveness. Other, more exotic synergies include ones like the Shitbox Supreme Jekyll and Hyde, whose Noble Phantasm grants a permanent buster buff tied to overcharge, so a single Himiko NP turns into a lot of value over time, provided you can keep this idiot alive. Super Orion has a non-damaging Noble Phantasm, but overcharging it gives him even more crit damage for his earth-shattering buster cards. Down the road, we get Ash the Savior as a unique servant, and her overcharge actually reduces the cooldown on one of her skills. More overcharge means more cooldown reduction. The skill in question is a 50% party-wide battery, NP damage, and guts package. So the 2 can potentially feed into each other, though I will note that Ash's Last Resort has an exceptionally long cooldown, so you could be there a while. Arash, Chengong, and Bima have massive damage spikes tied to their overcharge effects, and these increases only apply at 200% overcharge or higher. Himiko can help these servants push damage, though neither Arash nor Gong are much for crits. Gong, though, can help a Berserker crit extremely hard as well. You can work this into a cheeky setup for enmity servants like Hijikata, who do extra damage based on their missing health. This effect scales off overcharge, so you can get that direct Himiko synergy too. Then you activate Hijikata's guts and chain their NPs in this order: Himiko, Chengong, Hijikata. Himiko overcharges both of them, Chengong gains the extra damage and also kills Hijikata, and then the latter's guts pops, putting him at 1 HP and maxing out his enmity. Then Hijikata NPs and sends your target on a one-way trip to hell. Just make sure to put Hijikata in your leftmost slot to avoid any accidents. Also, having Chengong taunt himself will protect Pickleman from basic attacks. Bima plays more smoothly than Arash or Chengong, being a buster crit servant. You'll have to wait a while before he shows up though, since he's introduced in the post-Lost Belt era. But once he does come out, I think you'll get a kick out of the combo if you're a Himiko enthusiast. If I were to pick out Himiko's biggest weakness, it's that she's a supportive character with no shared charge. She has a 50% battery, but it only works for her. Oftentimes, if you have a choice in the matter, it's less cumbersome to run 2 Koyanskayas and just accelerate your attacker of choice into a battle-ending threat. Giving your attackers reliable NP access counts for a lot in the offensive realm, and it's one where Himiko struggles to make her mark. Yeah, she can pinch hit with her own steroids, but it ain't the same, man. The fact of the matter is that as badly as buster servants want Himiko's buff suite, they want the crack that's charge acceleration even more. But Himiko has one final trick to keep relevant. By default, she's only good at keeping herself alive. However, there is a way of turning her resilience into immortality. Not just for her, but her entire team. Longtime viewers may be familiar with the Immortal team from my Morgan video, but here's a rundown for any neophytes. Castoria has one of the most powerful Noble Phantasms in the game, generating a team-wide invulnerability that can't be bypassed with Invuln Pierce. The catch is that it's hit-based and requires overcharge to keep its effectiveness over multiple turns. That's where Himiko comes in. She's one of the two really good overcharge engines for the Immortal team, and her natural resilience plays into the team's slow, grinding playstyle quite well. Fun fact, Himiko even has a passive that makes her immune to both poison and curse effects, so it's hard to even chip her out that way. But she can be chipped out. When you're running 30 plus turns on a fight, little damage adds up, and neither Himiko nor Castoria can naturally heal up. To counter this, you run a healer in your third slot to complete the package, with one of the Merlins being ideal for this purpose since he gives consistent charge separate from his cooldowns. Then you start chaining NPs. Himiko, Merlin, Castoria will give you the best results. You can just go Himiko Castoria in a pinch. Now there are some differences between the Himiko and Morgan versions of the Immortal team. Here's the biggest one. Morgan's NP does damage, Himiko's doesn't. Over the course of a 30-minute fight, that does add up. Morgan's sole concern is making sure her team can NP, and funny enough, she actually has the personal and targeted batteries to make this happen. So while you focus on batteries and arts cards, Lordless Camelot is grinding away your target without you needing to think about it. Himiko, by contrast, can only secure her own charge, putting pressure on you to prioritize your team's arts cards for uptime. But Himiko's damage output comes from her Buster face cards, so there's a lot more risk involved. Do you risk constantly bleeding damage or potentially missing a life-saving combo? But there's an upside to Himiko's method. Barring some exceptional bullshit or class-based undershooting, your enemies are collectively allotted 3 actions per turn in standard fights, and 1 each in extended frontline fights. But you wouldn't be running the Immortal team for those anyway, so forget about that second category. The point is that you can eat every attack with your layers of protection, and because of this, keeping adds alive is a viable option. In fact, a pair of lowly skeletons can just swing their swords and suck their thumbs, leaving the real threat with only a single action. And if that threat can cast stuns, NP seals, buff blocks, or hard mitigation, you're better off letting trash mobs cannibalize their actions. Put simply, I'd say the trade-off is that Himiko has more control over when the damage comes out, but less opportunities to cash in. Also, Morgan gives 1 less overcharge level for the record, but in practice I found it doesn't make all that big of a difference since I just triple chain NPs anyway, so take that as you will. The Immortal team utility alone makes Himiko a strong addition to your roster, especially if you couldn't obtain Morgan. But be aware that the latter sees more reruns than Scooby-Doo, so you have the option of toughing it out if you're aiming for someone else short-term, like say Bazette. Outside of the Immortal team, her uses are a bit more restrictive, but you can do funny meme overcharge builds in combination with Koyanskaya and the right attacker, so it's not a total bust. Now then, let's talk history. There's not a whole lot of definitive info about Himiko's life. Supposedly, her existence wasn't even clear in the early Japanese sources. In fact, records of a Queen Himiko actually come from the Chinese side. She had sent envoys to Cao Wei, one of the 3 kingdoms of the post-Han Dynasty period. Like I said, the facts are sparse, so this story's gonna have the mythology mixed in. Fair warning. Himiko lived at the end of something called the Yayoi period, which is a massive 1300-year span that goes from towards the end of Japan's Stone Age all the way into its Iron Age. Unlike the Mediterranean, East Asia didn't have a cataclysmic collapse separating its Bronze and Iron Ages, so the transitions don't seem nearly as clear. But the point is this. The Yayoi period saw the development and expansion of agricultural settlements, given a shot in the arm by advances in rice cultivation brought over from the continent. Metalworking came along too, and this period produced the bronze bells and mirrors that you've been farming in the Gura event. I don't know what's up with the clamps though. These settlements and their population grew, forming power centers. Eventually, these polities entered into a massive war that went for decades, closing in on 100 years. Then comes Himiko, who used her spirit magic to make the people of the land submit to her authority. She was a shaman, you see, and her sway over the supernatural proved decisive in restoring order. Her domain is known as Yamataikoku, and no one's quite sure where it is. Archaeologists are going at it to this day, but they have some guesses, tending towards the southwest and south-central parts of Japan. Supposedly, Himiko was a hands-off kind of ruler. She made her home in a fortress, supported by a staff of 1,000 women and a single man. His job? Allegedly feeding her. Whether it's the cooking kind or the laid-back in a chair feeding grapes kind, your guess is as good as mine. In her fortress of not quite solitude, she attended to the spiritual world. She tasked her brother with handling the material world, and apparently this arrangement went quite well. Himiko ruled for 60 plus years, which if you consider the fact that the previous century was one big battle royale, was quite the shift in fortunes for the people of her country. Upon her death, Himiko was buried in a kofun, a massive key-shaped mound of earth. So while she's left this mortal plane, maybe we'll see her in Kingdom Hearts. Worry not though, she wasn't lacking for company in the afterlife. 100 slaves were, volunteered to go with her. That's just how the ancient Far East be sometimes. Sometime after Himiko's death, the throne of Yamataikoku went to a relative named Io, who we'll have cause to deal with down the road. Himiko's passing marked the end of an epoch, going from Japan's murky mythological age to one where the light of history shines a bit brighter. Speaking of light, something called Himiko's mirror exists to this day. It's a bronze mirror with a special kind of curve to it. When light hits the front, patterns appear on the backside. I do think it's interesting how Japan has so many specifically attributed artifacts around. Seems like the sort of thing that would make for some good fate stories. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come watch me on twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. This week I'll be finishing up Fate Samurai Remnant and the Ptolemy Grail front, so stop on by for a good time. See you there.